Before New York became the city that never sleeps, it was something completely different. A Dutch colony that changed hands without a single shot fired. A place where enslaved Africans built the foundations of what would become America's greatest metropolis, and a frontier outpost that shifted between empires like a pawn on a chessboard. This is the hidden history of New York in the 1600s, and it's nothing like you'd expect. It's one of history's most famous real estate transactions. Manhattan purchased for 24 guilders worth of trade goods. But the truth is far more complicated than the myth. In 1626, Dutch officials negotiated with the Lenape people for control of the island. The deal was quiet, practical, and deeply misunderstood across cultures. The Lenape likely saw it as a sharing agreement. The Dutch saw it as ownership. This cultural clash would define everything that followed. But let's rewind. 17 years earlier, Henry Hudson's crew stepped onto a wooded tidal shore alive with Lenape trade routes. His landing in 1609 marked the first European foothold along the river that would bear his name. It was a modest arrival, uncertain, unadorned, but it opened the door to merchants, settlers, and competing empires. Everything that would come next started on that quiet shore. What followed was brutal. In the early days of New Amsterdam, settlers felled thick Manhattan forests with hand axes, dragging heavy logs through mud to raise homes, palisades, and warehouses. Wood smoke, sweat, and the crack of splitting timber filled the air. The small colony carved itself out of wilderness, one beam, one plank, one hard-earned day at a time. This wasn't some grand imperial project. It was back-breaking survival. In 1626, Fort Amsterdam rose at the southern tip of Manhattan, a rough palisade of timber and earth. From its ramparts, soldiers watched over the harbor's shifting tides, the warehouses of the Dutch West India Company, and the fragile beginnings of New Amsterdam. It was the colony's shield and its statement of intent, a foothold meant to last. But could it? By 1644, years of bloodshed between Dutch settlers and native nations demanded resolution. Around council fires and makeshift tables, envoys traded wampum, promises, and uneasy concessions. Dutch leaders and native nations forged a series of fragile treaties meant to quiet the violence. The agreements brought a brief, hard-won peace, less trust than exhaustion. Yet they allowed New Amsterdam to breathe and rebuild, at least temporarily. But there's a darker thread woven through this story. In 1655, enslaved Africans were brought into New Amsterdam in growing numbers. Sold as property by the Dutch West India Company, their forced labor became essential to the colony's docks, farms, and households. They lived under harsh rules and constant supervision. It was a quiet but brutal turning point, becoming a fixed part of the city's early economy. This is the foundation modern New York was built on. So, what was daily life actually like? Inside a New Amsterdam home in the mid-17th century, life unfolded in a single crowded room, warmed by a brick hearth. Light filtered through small leaded windows, falling across rough-hewn tables, wool blankets, and pewter dishes stacked neatly on shelves. Families rose early to the smell of porridge and the scrape of wooden stools. Children helped grind grain or fetch water, while adults tended to do chores, mending nets, cutting firewood, and preparing salted meats for winter. The air carried a mix of wood smoke, drying herbs, and the damp scent of river winds slipping through the cracks. Evenings were quiet but full. Candles guttered low as stories were told, prayers whispered, and tools laid out for the morning's work. Life was modest, disciplined, and communal. Every task, cooking, sewing, sweeping, tending livestock, held the steady rhythm of survival in a growing but still fragile settlement. Then everything changed. In 1664, English warships drifted into the harbor, their guns trained on the fort that still bore the Dutch lion. Outnumbered and divided, New Amsterdam offered little resistance. Governor Peter Stuyvesant's protests faded beneath the colonists' desire for calmer rule. With a quiet surrender, the city passed to English hands and gained a new name, New York. Its future was redirected without a single shot fired. In 1667, the Treaty of Breda formally sealed what force had begun. The Dutch ceded New Netherland to England in exchange for distant gains in Suriname. The agreement confirmed New York as English territory, ending Dutch hopes of reclaiming the colony. With a stroke of diplomacy, the city's new identity, its laws, loyalties, and future became fixed on the English side of the empire. But wait, there's a plot twist. In 1673, Dutch ships swept into the harbor and reclaimed the city with sudden force, renaming it New Orange and restoring old banners for a single restless year. Dutch pride flared briefly, but diplomacy moved faster than cannons. By the next treaty, the colony was returned to England. New Orange once again became New York. The moment was brief, a flicker of the old Dutch world before the English future closed firmly around it. By 1679, the old Dutch Stadhuis served as New York's City Hall, a leftover of New Amsterdam, now operating under English rule. Merchants, magistrates, and clerks moved through its cramped rooms, settling disputes and recording the business of a growing cosmopolitan port. The building stood as a reminder of the city's Dutch past, still useful, still central, even as New York pushed into its new identity. Around 1680, New York was expanding quickly under English rule. The population topped 4,000. New brick houses rose along the streets, and the port grew busier with Atlantic trade. At the same time, the enslaved population increased sharply, shaping the colony's labor force and daily life. Growth came at a human cost. By 1679, New York's great docks stretched into the East River as the colony's busiest gateway. Merchants, sailors, and laborers crowded its planks, unloading barrels of sugar, furs, and tobacco, while new ships pressed in from the Atlantic. The dock's constant creak and roar signaled the city's growing ambitions, a small port rapidly becoming a vital link in the empire's trade. The city's architecture told the story of its transition. By 1680, New York's homes still showed strong Dutch influence, steep gables, brick facades, and thick wooden beams. Despite years of English rule, newer buildings added English touches like sash windows or broader chimneys, but the streets remained visibly Dutch in shape and style. The city, like its people, was a blend in transition. The old defensive wall still marked the northern edge of the settlement, running along the line that would become Wall Street. Its timber ramparts were aging but intact, a reminder of earlier threats. Where the wall met the East River stood the Watergate, a modest, fortified passage where carts, travelers, and river goods entered the town under watchful guard. Every person, every barrel, every transaction passed through this choke point. In 1689, New York was tense and unsettled. News from England spoke of kings rising and falling. The Glorious Revolution had turned everything upside down. The colony was unsure whose authority truly ruled. New York's train band, the citizen militia, mustered amid the unrest. Merchants, artisans, and laborers drilled on the commons, a mix of Dutch, English, and colonial-born men caught in shifting loyalties. In the turmoil, many officers signed a declaration backing Jacob Leisler and refusing the old royal appointees. But the rebellion proved brief. For all their moments of resolve, they ended the year once again under royal authority. Merchants argued in taverns, soldiers drilled on the commons, and ordinary residents watched the harbor for ships that might bring orders or upheaval. The city lived in a state of uneasy waiting, caught between rumor, uncertainty, and the shifting tide of empire. By 1699, Pearl Street had become one of New York's busiest lanes, curving along the old shoreline where traders, craftsmen, and sailors crowded its wooden shops. The scent of tar, spices, and river wind drifted through the street, a reminder of how close the city lived to the sea that sustained it. By century's end, the settlement stood restless and growing, a crossroads of ambition on the edge of a vast continent. From Dutch trading post to English colony, through war, rebellion, and transformation, New York had survived, and it was just getting started. The 1600s laid the foundation for everything New York would become. The diverse population, the merchant culture, the grid of streets that still exist today, all started here, in this century of chaos and transformation. What story should we reconstruct next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. And if you want to see more hidden histories brought back to life, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.